صباح الخير. Good. Okay, let's go. Oh my God. Oh wow.
Dating to the 26th Dynasty around 550 BC, Benuti's tomb contains very unique scenes of specific gods only to this region. Gods that he would have personally chosen to include in his tomb.
Sabat, can you give me a light? That's what I'm doing. Thank you. So, this is so interesting because this is a goddess just from Bahariya. She's only worshipped here, and she has a little hedgehog on her head. So, it's really interesting that even here in the 25th dynasty, 26th dynasty actually, that they even included a local goddess amongst all of the other goddesses. We're not quite sure of her function, but we can imagine that a hedgehog, some sort of protection, strength, and you need that out here in the middle of the desert.
She is known as the goddess Bastet. She is mentioned nowhere else in ancient Egypt, only here at this necropolis in Bahariya. She is symbolized by the hedgehog, who would close itself in to protect from sandstorms. The goddess of moisture, Tefnut, is present, shown here as a woman and not as a lioness. The gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt are always distinguishable because of their symbolism. Beautifully painted in blue, this is the scepter of Was, the controlling scepter that was usually only shown with male gods holding it.
A perfectly carved alabaster shrine. Here is the god Amun, so beautifully depicted, the feathers on his shirt, and a little detail is the name of the god Amun on his belt. This is completely and utterly exquisite.
Now the Opet festival of Amun had arrived in year 7. This would be the first time Hatshepsut would appear to the public, not as supervisor of the child pharaoh Thutmose III, but as actual pharaoh. The texts in the chapel tell us that Amun spoke to Hatshepsut. I will cause you to rest upon my throne. I will seize for you the crook and the flail. I will mold you that you may make offerings before your creator, that you may cause the shrines of the gods to grow, that you may protect this land and its people, that your terror may seize that which acts as a crime, and those who plan rebellion, for the times that you may seize strength as Lord of power. Then this land will be in your grasp. You will cause the laws to be established. You will subdue chaos. You will cut off the arm of your enemies. You will decree to the living, and they will observe according to your instructions. Welcome, my sweet daughter, my favorite, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Hatshepsut. Thou art the pharaoh taking possession of the two lands, Ma'at Kara. Then she is seen striding towards the god Amun, who is known for his fertile procreativity powers.
The Red Chapel of Hatshepsut contains so many scenes of Hatshepsut as well as Thutmose III, her stepson. But what I really find so intriguing is that we can see Hatshepsut here shown as a male pharaoh, as a man. However, above the image of Hatshepsut, we can see her name, Hatshepsut. This is a woman dressed, presenting herself to the public as a man, giving offerings before Amun, the male god of fertility. Up here, we have Hatshepsut running in her Jubilee celebration. It's quite incredible to think that this woman had to go to the extent of showing herself as a male ruler just to be accepted, when a couple hundred years before her, we have Sobekneferu, who presented herself as a woman, as a pharaoh. In the Red Chapel of Hatshepsut, right here in this basin, would have been filled with water that the Egyptians would have washed the lettuce that they would have offered to the god Amun on the inside. Lettuce, as we know, was the main offering to Amun.
This lettuce, when broken in half, would leak a thick white liquid, symbolizing the white fluid Min would bless a man with to reproduce children.
So when they would wash the lettuce in this basin, it would drain off on the sides. They would bring the lettuce from the basin and place it on the offering table with drainage again before a statue of Amun.
So she knew that the wolfsbane would make her brother's tongue swell, his throat close, and paralyze him. He would not be able to call out for help, and there would be no trace of bodily harm. Upon her brother's death, she declared herself and her infant son, Caesarion, as co-rulers over all Egypt. During this time, Cleopatra began to take on the role as reincarnated Isis even more seriously. She had the giant image of Isis carved onto the main pylon at Philae Temple.
But in actual fact, the woman standing behind Horus, shown with a fuller face, fuller body, is actually Cleopatra VII.
In accordance with Egyptian mythology, Cleopatra was born of goddess. She was believed to be the human incarnation of Isis, the most powerful female deity of ancient Egypt.
The goddess Isis was worshipped by the Greeks and by the Romans as well. Her cult spread throughout the Mediterranean. And here we have the Isis goddess shown as a Greek woman with an Egyptian headdress.
This tomb is definitely more important than the other.
Yes.
It's longer.
Longer and also accurate, more accurate.
Yeah.
In the holes and walls, and also the passage and the kind of
The decoration is incredible. I mean, the cobras are, these are just stunning.
just these cobras, but it's like a little touch, but give the tomb like a taste. You can enjoy it, even it's not have that much of decoration, but the cobra made it.
It's more than enough security.
Yes, more than enough security. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21.
21 cobras. Yeah. And the glyphs are, it's so different, but it's really beautiful.
Read the goddess.
So we have Lord Horus, son of Osiris.
Yes, Horus Sa-Uzir.
Horus Sa-Uzir. Yeah, that's incredible.
And the other side also we have.
We have the beautiful Isis Hathor.
She is the wife of Osiris, and this tomb owner gets her name from this goddess.
You can see here life from Osiris, Hathor, and then Mesu Iset. Mesiset. And that determinative is clearly the lady's name.
Why you read like that?
Oh, well, we know because the birds are looking that way, right?
Yeah, this is a stupid question from me to ask you same questions. But something very easy with you. I'm stupid, sorry.
This tomb dates to around 300 BC, just as the Ptolemaic period started, around the time Alexander the Great was in Egypt. Underneath the cobras and the winged sun disk, Mesiset was laid to rest on this platform in her tomb. We know next to nothing about her, but her tomb tells us the ancient name of Siwa, Tha'at. The legend says that upon his arrival in Egypt, a large flock of birds were flying to the west. An Egyptian priest told Alexander that this was a sign and that he should follow the birds. Alexander and his men followed these birds and arrived at a distant place in the middle of the desert, an oasis, Siwa. This is where Alexander's dreams would become a reality. They rode through this landscape, which has scarcely changed since then, arriving at this mount. Here was the temple of Amun that housed the oracle. The temple was built around 700 BC by Greek mercenaries who settled in the area. The temple is a unique mix of Egyptian and Greek architecture, built right at the edge of the hill. Throughout history, many notable people would come to this temple to ask questions to the god Amun, where the oracle priest would answer on behalf of the god. This is where one of history's most powerful men once visited. I'm literally walking in the same footsteps as Alexander the Great. Up these steps, I'm gonna take you in the Amun temple where Alexander received his message from the oracle. However, what happened in these hallowed halls remains somewhat of a mystery still.
So this is where Alexander would have walked into. Coming here, right in the center, would be the statue of Amun-Ra. And Alexander would have spoken to Amun, asked him whatever questions took place, we're not exactly sure. And Amun spoke back to him. When Amun spoke back to him, he said, Alexandros, you are my son. And this legitimized Alexander's claim to becoming a pharaoh. Alexander would have left. As he left, he swept away his footprints. He was given a broom from one of the priests. He swept away his footprints and left the room. This is one version of the story. Now, there is a debate happening as to exactly how the oracle gave him this message. The oracle is, of course, a high priest that would probably take a hallucinogenic and see these visions and speak as the voice of the god. The voice would come either from above or from below. We're not exactly sure on which one of these theories is correct. In this room, I believe we would have had the statue of Amun. It makes sense. All Egyptian temples show the god in the central room. And above, there is a ledge and a window. And I believe it is that window where the oracle would have sat and spoken down. And Alexander would have heard that voice, believing it to be the voice of Amun himself. We have this little passage on the side here where it's blocked off now, but long ago, there's a staircase going up to that exact window that I spoke about now, where I believe the oracle would sit and speak down as the voice of Amun. This is the one that I like to believe. This is where the oracle was in the version of the story I like. There's another version where They believe in this room, in the third room. Down here is a well with an entrance from the outside. Because on the other side of this wall, it is a steep cliff on the mountain. The oracle or the high priest would come in through this doorway, go into the well, and speak up as the voice of Amun. And in this room, we have the area where the sound could come through, like a well, and through the hole here in the ground, you can see the sunlight coming through. That would connect and the sound could come through. And it's believed that over here would have stood, in one of the versions, the statue of Amun, and the oracle's voice would come out from here. So there is a debate going around as to exactly which room this took place in. I prefer the central room as it makes more sense with Egyptian beliefs. A third theory, which is a combination of both, which is Alexander came into this room. There was already a carved window here. The oracle went up the stairs and spoke through that window, which is more likely because we have the Temple of Horus, where we have the window above, which has the oracle speaking from above. So that makes more sense than a well. Alexander would have come and stood exactly on this block that I'm standing on now, and looked through this hole and spoke to Amun through the hole. And he would not be able to see the oracle sitting above, it's blocked off, thus creating the illusion that it is the statue of Amun speaking. And he could speak to Amun through here, because only the high priest and a pharaoh was allowed to go into the main sanctuary. And Alexander would speak to Amun through here, and this is where he received his message, on this block, standing here speaking to the god. So we're not exactly sure which version of the story to believe. I prefer the first one, where Alexander was allowed right in front of the priest. But all three of these stories are plausible.
Once Alexander was proclaimed as the son of Amun, he allegedly was processioned through the village, accompanied by 80 priests of Amun. Amun was the principal god of Egypt. He was also known as the god of the gods. He was seen as the equal to the Greek god Zeus, and in many instances they were combined, creating Zeus Amun. Very few images still remain in the temple, yet we can see some scenes of Amun with his wife Mut. The cartouche of Pharaoh Amasis has been found in this site, which makes even more sense being built by Greek mercenaries, as Pharaoh Amasis had sent much gold to help rebuild the burnt-down temple of Delphi in Greece. Of course, this temple is surrounded in myth. Perseus was said to have visited here before beheading Medusa, and Hercules may also have been here once. The temple and the village of Agurmi surrounding it was said to have been founded by two banished Theban priestesses, one of which went to Greece and founded the temple of Dodona. Another foundation myth is that the Greek god Dionysus was lost in the Libyan desert. Almost about to die from thirst, a figure appeared and led him to the spring of Agurmi. To give thanks for his life, he erected the temple and blessed the oasis to become forever fertile. All of these are good stories, but are myths. The reality is, it was built by the Greek mercenaries, the men that aided the Egyptian army. After his coronation in Memphis, Alexander went south to visit the home of his spiritual father Amun. He visited the great temple of Amun at Karnak. Now pharaoh, he was allowed into the inner sanctuary, where a small golden statue of Amun rested in a shrine. Alexander would have come here and performed a ceremony reserved only for the pharaoh and the high priests.
The inner sanctuary at Karnak temple, dedicated to Amun. Right in the center, we have this plinth where the statue of the god Amun would be placed. The boat would be placed here as well. Every morning the priests would come in, open the doors, and adorn the statue of Amun with oils, makeup, leave offerings, and before they left they would sweep their footprints away, leaving the house of the god in immaculate state. This, right here, was the center of ancient Egypt.
Slight traces of Alexander remain on the walls of this sanctuary. In the grounds of Karnak, a large statue depicting Alexander would be erected. He wears the Egyptian Nemes headdress, yet appears as a Greek, with his hair poking through the band and his neck slightly tilted to one side, a characteristic from all depictions of Alexander. The newly crowned foreign pharaoh would then visit the Ipet-Reset temple, the southern sanctuary, now known as Luxor Temple. At Luxor Temple, Alexander commissioned the inner sanctuary to be extended. He had a new shrine built in the existing sanctuary, where he showed himself giving many offerings to Amun, wearing various crowns of Egypt, like the blue Kepresh war crown.
We can see Alexander and Amun. We know it's Alexander from his name.
Yeah.
Alexandros.
Yeah.
Alexandros.
Alexandros.
Here we have Alexander the Great offering jars to Amun with his erect, circumcised penis.
Yes.
But there's something interesting happening here that you told me about. What's going on, Lami?
Something coming out from the semen because Amun ejaculating in front of Alexander the Great. So from semen there's something similar to sperm comes out. We have controversial here. Some people said the thickest was here, and someone he just connect between the scene and also the penis of Amun. So it's controversial. Until now, we can understand really what's going on. If it's a sperm, did the ancient Egyptian invent microscopes?
I doubt that.
Yeah.
They knew something.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But it's interesting we see that because we have a festival once a year where the pharaoh had to ejaculate into the Nile to keep the Nile fertile in front of an audience.
Yeah.
So
it is very weird, and at the same time part of their culture. Maybe we can understand it, but by their time it's very understood.
Yeah.
Or acceptable too.
Yeah. In the inner sanctuary at Luxor Temple would have been housed the boat that had the statue of the god Khonsu, the son of Amun and Mut. The boat for Khonsu had the head of a ram, a symbol for the son of Amun. And once a year, the boat would be taken out and brought to Karnak Temple down the Avenue of Sphinxes.
Alexander the Great here, he wear the crown of South, and there he wear the crown of North. And behind him, the provinces of ancient Egypt in South. Above each one of them, the name of the province. So here we have like Itfu, and here we have a female, the only exception here. Do you know why? because she is Luxor, Waset. He wanted to recognize Luxor and make Luxor like distinguished. That's why he made it as a lady.
A pharaoh was seen as the reincarnation of Horus, and thus Alexander's wish had come true. He was a god. Being the son of Amun, too, meant he was a god on earth. It would have been here in Luxor where Alexander saw the power of the pharaohs. Amongst them was Ramses II. Alexander saw the might of this king and the empire he wielded strewn across the walls of the temples. Alexander would adopt the symbol which mighty pharaohs like Ramses had been ordained to wear. He showed himself wearing the curved ram's horns, showing the sheer power connected to Amun. Inside this smaller section of Luxor Temple is a piece of Ramses II, shown here with the ram's horns of Amun, the ram's horns that would be repeated by every pharaoh that wanted to be connected to the reign of Ramses the Great. Alexander emulated the great pharaohs such as Ramses to take on their strength to build his empire. He commissioned new coins of himself, showing the ram's horns of Amun, so that all throughout his empire would know he was Pharaoh.
We don't often see Alexander the Great depicted as an Egyptian or even as a pharaoh, only on a couple of statues and carvings. However, here we have something so unique. It is Alexander depicted as the god Hapi before an offering table with fish and plants hanging off of the offering table. Isn't he just the most magnificent example of Greek and Egyptian art combined?
A very unique statue of the god of gods, Amun, can tell us about the status of Amenirdis. Sitting on the lap of Amun, being supported by him, is Amenirdis. No other woman, man, pharaoh, nor queen, apart from Amenhotep III, have ever been shown on the lap of Amun. This is so significant. It shows that Amenirdis has the closest relationship with Amun than anyone else. Although this faience statue is only a few centimeters tall, the glyphs are even more impressive.
The glyphs on the side of this statue read out Chemet Neter, Sa'at Neter, Meri Amun, Amenirdis, which translates to the god's wife, the beloved daughter of Amun, Amenirdis.
Right at the back of Karnak Temple, we can see Amenirdis, here receiving the key of life from Amun, as he hands her 3 keys of life, 3 lifetimes. The woman from Nubia, brought to Egypt and made into a god. Amenirdis was being prepared to be one of the most important religious figures in all of Egyptian history. At the Cairo home of an early 20th century Irishman named Geir Anderson, amongst his vast curated collection of Egyptian artifacts, is a piece that shows Amenirdis at Karnak, joining with Amun. In the Geir Anderson Museum is a beautiful plaque from Karnak Temple of Amenirdis being embraced by Amun. This is when she became the god's wife.
The role of the god's wife of Amun was very important in ancient Egypt. not only politically, in so much as she had lots of property, she had money, but she also was very important in the daily, like the taxing and the political decisions and these types of things. It was also very important role for her to have religiously and within the temples. Amenirdis would also have been trained in depth on some of the other rituals that were very important to the keeping of Ma'at throughout the land. One of these was a kind of an execration type of a ritual in which the serpent Apep, who was always after the sun god Ra, when he would ride in his boat through the hours of the night, was always trying to take Ra out so that time would stop. And every morning Ra would somehow overcome him with the help of various gods and goddesses who were on the boat with him, and he would rise once again. And so there was a very special ritual called the overcoming or the overthrowing of Apep. And part of the ritual was that they would create these little wax figurines of the serpent Apep. And that was so that during the ritual, at various parts, that this serpent could be cut with a knife, this serpent could be spat upon, stomped upon, and even set on fire to keep away this element of chaos in the land of Egypt. And this is something that Amenirdis would have taken part in, is to make sure that Apep was completely taken out so that Ra could successfully make it through the hours of the night and rise once again in the morning. There was another very important aspect within this role of the god's wife of Amun. Sometimes the god's wives were also known as the god's hand. And this is in reference to something that we today might find a little embarrassing, but it was very much a part of just life and matter of fact, something that happened in ancient Egypt that they didn't really blink an eye about. And this was the act of self-pleasure. And within this act of self-pleasure, obviously there needs to be the hand to do that. And so when the high priestess would shake the sistrum, it mimicked that motion of being the hand of the god, which is a role that the wife would perform. And then within this act, it brings to life all of these elements of creative abilities and gifts and potential that the god would have. So the playing of the sistrum also was a very important part of the practices that Amenirdis would do to keep everything going and flowing in the right direction. When we think about Amenirdis, I like to think about her as she would be waking up in the morning as the high priestess, knowing that she needed to get up, she needed to go to the sacred lake with the high priest and the high priestesses, other priestesses at the temple, purify themselves in the water. They would prepare all of the incense and they would prepare the food and get it all laid out and carrying it on trays and carrying their sistrum and wearing these beautiful clothes and all of their own jewels and makeup and entering into the hypostyle hall in the darkness, and someone would be walking and carrying the torch. And so seeing the light flickering on the temple walls, smelling all of the food and all of the incense and all of the fragrance from the essential oils and hearing their footsteps. And, you know, outside someone would be walking out to that front portion of the temple to awaken that area with their songs and chants and hymns. And then someone would be waiting on the roof, and as soon as the sun god would come up, they would be singing and chanting and welcoming the god to the day. I like to think about Amenirdis in this way, as a woman, as someone who has a sense of devotion to the gods and goddesses. Yes, it was her duty, but I do feel that there was an element of belief inside of her and this wanting to please the gods and goddesses in her role as the god's wife.
Mutemwia would go on to give birth to the next pharaoh of Egypt. On this scene, we can see Amenhotep III on the lap of Amun. We see Amenhotep III as a baby here. He is on the lap of his spiritual father, Amun. This is shown happening after his mother, Mutemwia, has conceived the next pharaoh with the god Amun. This is Sinai, a peninsula of land between Egypt and the Red Sea. For the religious, Sinai is most well known for the story of Moses. However, Sinai has been inhabited by the ancient Egyptians since the pre-dynastic period, over 6,000 years ago. Today, this arid landscape is home to the Egyptian Bedouin people who eke out a living in a place that has almost no vegetation and even less rain. However, this region has a place that was very important to the pharaohs, a place that was sacred to one goddess in particular, the temple at Serbit el-Khadim, dedicated to the goddess Hathor, or more specifically, Hathor, the Lady of Turquoise. For you see, this area was home to the precious sky blue stone. Hathor may be a fairly unknown goddess to those who aren't interested in Egyptian history compared to others, yet to the ancient Egyptians, she was probably one of the most revered deities of all time, sometimes even eclipsing the great goddess Isis, and in later periods, the goddesses were even combined to create one ultimate icon. Hathor was linked to many aspects: love, beauty, music, dance, and protection. When the god Horus was feuding with his uncle Set, trying to avenge the murder of his father Osiris, the devious Set was able to stab out one of Horus's eyes during one of their many battles. The goddess Hathor then crafted a new eye for Horus, an eye which she infused her powers into to always protect Horus. Eventually, Horus avenged his father's murder by defeating Set and becoming king of the land of Egypt. He then married Hathor, and thus each king and queen to rule Egypt thereafter were to be seen as the reincarnation of both Hathor and Horus. The site of Serbit el-Khadim was used for thousands of years to mine copper and the sacred stone linked to the protective powers of Hathor, turquoise. This stone was used to decorate furniture, used in paints, but most importantly, to make exceptional jewelry. Apart from decorating the living, turquoise also decorated the dead. On many death masks, we can find turquoise inlays around the neck. It was out here in this extreme, remote site that some of the stones were mined to decorate one of the most famous pieces of ancient Egyptian art ever, the golden death mask of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. The ancients were so fascinated by the stones of Hathor that they invented the blue faience as a way to imitate the blue color for jewels, statues, and even burial equipment, like the beaded net dress that linked the dead to Hathor. But why would a goddess who was there to celebrate the joy of life be connected to the dead? In the New Kingdom, in some cases, Hathor becomes the Lady of the West, replacing the role of Anubis to lead you through the journey into the afterlife. And thus, if you had some turquoise with you, it would indicate to Hathor that you worshipped her in life, and thus she would be more inclined to help you reach heaven. In the modern world, there seems to be this huge craze for all things related to cats. People spend hours watching viral cat videos, and of course, they are the second most popular pets to have after the dog. And it's this modern craze that has led to some interesting untruths about the cat in ancient Egypt. I start my feline journey up north in the Nile Delta, in a remote ancient city known as Bubastis. This derelict city was one of the most populated in all of ancient Egypt, dating back to the Old Kingdom around 4,500 years ago. Bubastis was known as the birthplace of the cat goddess Bastet. This myth probably originates from local farmers along this fertile stretch who began to domesticate cats and keep them in their homes to help fend off rats and other vermin. This is, after all, one of the functions of Bastet. The Egyptians often saw the personality trait in certain animals and made them into gods to ensure that the qualities they valued could be harnessed. A cat fending off rats and snakes from the home was certainly something they wanted to harness. Much like the goddess Selket, who could protect from poisons and bites, symbolized by the scorpion. However, the worship of the cat seems to rarely stem in the Old Kingdom from the lioness goddess Sekhmet. Sekhmet had several personality traits, and thus the calm side of Sekhmet was split off into the miniature version of the lioness, the cat. This shift of Sekhmet's calm side rarely appears to have been a practice more of farmers, commoners, and housewives, rather than royals and priests. Even if he didn't need Bastet, she was still a goddess of a larger common folk, and being a goddess, he still had to venerate her as part of the plethora of gods. Ramses wanted to be seen with as many gods as possible. In fact, there is only one known scene of a pharaoh worshipping Bastet, and it comes from Bubastis.
The reason why you see me climbing up this rock is because we have this image of the cat goddess Bastet. It was originally up here, someone's pushed it down, probably the Christians when they came to destroy this temple. But here is the cat goddess Bastet, shown with Ramses II giving her an offering of what looks like to be bread in a bread mold. But because this is the cat goddess, maybe he should have been giving her an offering of milk. So, at least I can see Bastet from this angle. We have found Bastet again. On this column, on the other side, we can see her name written, Bastet. But here, we can see the beautiful cat goddess shown seated on a throne.
There is, however, another cat goddess from this area of Egypt. Different to Bastet in the Delta, Pekhmet was a more ferocious form of cat. Again associated with the lioness Sekhmet, she had a temple at El-Minya, built by the female pharaoh Hatshepsut in 1480 BC. Pekhmet looks different from the usual form of domestic cat. She is shown in some of the noble tombs at Beni Hassan, and back at Deir al-Medina, the workers there included Pekhmet in their tombs. A pet Pekhmet is usually shown with a lead and a collar, as this cat was very dangerous. So dangerous that she became a protector in the afterlife and is shown in their papyri and tombs killing a demon snake with a dagger. This cat has strange long ears. Pekhmet is in fact a caracal, one of the most fierce small felines. At the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, a later dynasty pharaoh named Nectanebo
is actually shown in the company of Pekhmet, in a form of a woman with a caracal head. Yet on this piece, there is a woman nursing a child in front of two Hathor pillars, and by the pillars sit two Bastet cats. This could symbolize Bubastis. A few hours north of Bubastis, in ancient Tanis, this site even more in ruin than Bubastis. It contains an obscure 21st Dynasty pharaoh's tomb from 1047 BC. The tomb was shared with Pharaoh Sheshonq and belonged to Pharaoh Susanes.
That's better. You get
Right
the
there,
shadow. Yeah.
Okay. We'll fix it in post.
In the tomb, we can see Susanes before the goddess, the cat goddess, Pekhmet. In Luxor, at the royal tombs built by the men from Deir al-Medina, such as this tomb built for the son of Ramses III, we find examples of more ferocious feline deities. A male lion guardian, and on another wall is a cat with the name spelled out, Meow. She guards Gate 12 of the Underworld. In the tomb of Nefertari is a ferocious guardian in the form of a lioness wielding a knife with two snakes on her head. In the tomb of Pharaoh Siptah, however, is a smaller form of feline. She is shown as Meow, protecting a gate. Cats and particularly large felines were connected to the god Ra and Sekhmet, like the ferocious Pekhmet. Bastet, however, did have a son. Her mythological child was known as the male lion god of war, a god that Ramses II revered and named his pet lion after. Further south, along Lake Nasser at a temple named Der built by Ramses II, we can see that he gave his pet lion an actual name, unlike commoners who only named their cat Meow.
Ramses II in battle, smiting his enemies before Amun. But here is Ramses' pet lion. This is Mahes, the pet lion that's depicted at Bait al-Wali and Abu Simbel, and here at Der. This lion was trained by the Nubians and brought to Ramses as a gift. We can see Mahes' name written here at the top with the determinative of a lion. Ramses gave this lion an identity, and the name means the one who is beside him. This lion shone beside the great pharaoh.
What I love here is we see Sesostris in the form of Amun, with the feathers on his head, with the god Montu next to him, Montu identified by the two cobras on his brow, and obviously we can read his name. But what is so interesting is Montu has, on these ropes, he has the enemies, the 9 so-called enemies. Obviously they had more than 9 enemies, but these are the 9 major enemies. And they are all tied up here, and we can tell that these are different from cartouches. Around the name, we actually have what is like a city wall. So that is the city, the civilization that the pharaoh and the god have conquered, and they are tying up here. By the time of the rule of Sesostris II, a period of peace and prosperity spread throughout the land, with building and agricultural focuses in the Fayum Oasis and Sinai. Sesostris II even allowed foreigners to begin to move into certain areas in Egypt. This would have dire consequences by the time of his successor, the infamous tyrannical ruler Sesostris III. Sesostris III reinforced Egypt's power in the south in Nubia, having many military campaigns and building fortresses to protect the borders. However, he began to allow smaller independent regional rulers to have their own say.
Yet Sobekneferu completed a very mysterious building project in Fayum, a project that was linked to the god of her namesake, a place that was massively important in her religious beliefs, one that has caught my attention.
A temple built in the 12th dynasty by Amunemhat and continued by his daughter, the female pharaoh from the 12th dynasty, Sobekneferu.
Almost nothing remains of the original temple. The Greeks rebuilt it around 300 BC. Only one god is depicted here. The temple may seem small from the outside, but inside it hides many nooks and crannies. To the sides are several small chambers. Exploring down the labyrinth of hallways, we can see that these walls were once decorated. The limestone has been chipped at by ancient Christian visitors seeking to erase the pagan texts. Much of this temple is a mystery, with several pits dug meters down. Water lines lead me to suspect that they were once pools to house crocodiles, connecting Sobek, the energy of the Nile, to this place. A bridge over a 2-floor deep pit crosses over to 3 niches that contain the statues of the god. Crossing the bridge here is unique. I suspect it was to link you to the god Sobek, who lurked in the waters beneath your feet. The unlucky chosen priest was tasked with going down to leave offerings to the temple crocodile. The Greeks called this area Crocodiliopolis, the place of crocodiles.
Here at this temple of Sobek, Sobek is a crocodile god known in the Fayum area. He was a god of war and protection for the pharaoh, and he was mentioned as early as the pyramid text, which we find in the 5th dynasty pyramids of Unas out at Sakara. So he then later became part of the coffin texts as well, and later the Book of the Dead.
On the roof of the temple is the only inscription still remaining, with its human body and wearing a feathered skirt, holding a was scepter, appearing with a crocodile head, is Sobek, near a slit for light connecting him to Ra.
We're not actually sure why they even decided to build a temple to Sobek out here in this arid landscape with only the Fayum Oasis to provide water. Was it to bring healing and protection to this area, yet this area is not a water area? Or was it to invoke the water god, Sobek, the god of the Nile, to direct the Nile to come and make this land fertile?
But this temple raises more questions than answers. What evidence do we have that the ancient Egyptians kept crocodiles in the temple? I am traveling further south to get the answers. It is here at Kom Ombo that another cult center of Sobek was established. This temple was mainly renovated during the Ptolemaic rule, with images having a Greek flair to them, and even some scenes showing the great female pharaoh, Cleopatra. Sobek was a crocodile, and therefore he was seen as a god protecting the waters of the Nile.
This temple is dedicated obviously to Sobek, the crocodile god, but also, in part, to Horus. And these two, when they came together, this temple was used in the later period, during the Greek period, as almost like a hospital. People would come here to be healed. Sobek, over here,
would then be considered to heal, the skin and burns and things like that. What the Greeks believed Sobek was doing here when they transformed this temple into a hospital. And they then believed that Horus would heal the eyes. So these two gods came together here and were seen as healing deities, but before the Greek time, they had very different roles.
It is at the back of Kom Ombo Temple that we find proof of crocodiles being housed here.
These pits at the back of Kom Ombo are believed to be where they kept the temple crocodile. This would be one crocodile that embodied the spirit of Sobek. They kept them in here, and one priest had the lucky task of getting to put jewelry on this crocodile, and some of them even had painted nails. There are other pits around the temple as well that housed even bigger crocodiles.
Many of these temple crocodiles were mummified when they died. These Nile crocodiles were divine after all. But these were kept in water, in sunlight at Kom Ombo. But this doesn't answer my question about the water pits at Kaset Karun Temple in Fayum. Could Sobekneferu really have had Nile crocodiles in the dark waters below the temple that survived?
These texts are originally from the reign of Amunemhat. He's shown throughout the small temple, offering and receiving from the two patron gods of Fayum. While offering, Amunemhat in turn receives 3 chained ankhs from the crocodile-headed god Sobek. At the Cairo Museum, several pristine stela and ostraca from Medinet Mahdi can be found, showing the protector of the Nile, Sobek. A Horus priest from Sakara during the 19th Dynasty, named Nacht, even made offerings to Renenutet. The slender, elegant goddess, with her cobra appearance, stands behind the patron god of Sakara, Ptah, ensuring the land shall be fruitful. Back at Medinet Mahdi, carved into the papyrus-styled columns in one of her many forms, Renenutet welcomes the visitor as a full cobra.
So here we see the goddess Renenutet.
She's holding the ankh, a symbol of life, and then she's got the serpent head. So sometimes you'll see a human body with a cow head, a ram head, a hawk head. This is her with her serpent head.
Inside, her name appears very clearly, starting from above, from the mouth for R, the 2 water signs for N, the quail U, and 2 loaves of bread for the double T sound, Renenutet. The niche in the sanctuary once housed a triad statue of Amunemhat and his son, with Renenutet in the center. Many scenes in the sanctum show almost life-sized images of Amunemhat before Sobek and Renenutet. With his son behind, his son wears a cobra nemes, meaning he was co-regent at the time. 350 years later, female pharaoh Hatshepsut added her mark here in one of the niches, followed by her successor Thutmosis III. However, before Hatshepsut, the daughter of Amunemhat became pharaoh and added her mark here in the temple of her namesake.
Amenhotep in the ancient Egyptian language means the one who pleases the god Amun. Amun was for many hundreds of years the chief god of all Egypt, whose central domain was in Woodside. Amun was known as the god of the gods, who can take a hidden form and who was surrounding you at all times. Amenhotep III and his wife Queen T were seen as the earthly manifestation of Amun and his divine wife. they would perform rituals to Amun daily at the great temple Ipet Isut, or Karnak as we know it today. This was known as the home of the god Amun, the most sacred of all places. Much taxes and offerings consisting of all manner of things, such as food, clothing, incense, and even gold, poured into the coffers of Karnak. These were offered to the god Amun, who would absorb the essence of these gifts. Then the physical offerings were distributed and shared among the many priests of Amun, with only a tiny fraction going back to the pharaoh. With Amenhotep III being a diplomatic ruler and not a militaristic ruler, this time saw an innumerable amount of tribute given to Egypt from its many neighboring countries, making Egypt the wealthiest land in the ancient world during the time of Amenhotep III. And with all this wealth came much corruption. The priests were getting out of hand and becoming more and more powerful, and often challenged the pharaoh. To show his power to the population and the priests of Amun, Amenhotep III constructed an artificial lake near the palace of Melkata. He and his wife Ti would then perform a ceremony on one royal boat, reenacting the journey of the sun god Ra and the goddess Hathor, and thus reaffirming to the priests that Amenhotep and Ti were reincarnated gods on earth. But this act may have had a more profound meaning. It was connecting the pharaoh in a more direct way to the sun. He was taking on the roles of the sun god Ra. Solar worship was part of the Egyptian pantheon of gods, but only rarely in the form of the falcon-headed sun god Ra. This pharaoh went even further, causing a bit of a sensation when he named this boat Aten Chehen, meaning the dazzling Aten. Amenhotep performed this ceremony as his 30th year jubilee celebration, and then would perform this every 4 years thereafter. Thus the young pharaoh Akhenaten would have witnessed this. He would also have witnessed the rising tensions between the pharaoh, so-called Great House, and the priests of Amun. Seeing this at such a young age would of course affect him and mold his view of the world and religion. It is in these final 10 years of Amenhotep III's life that we start to see him focusing more on an obscure deity connected to the sun. Not the sun god Ra, but instead the physical sun itself, known as the Aten. Amenhotep III, in his final few years, even adopted the title epithets of the dazzling Aten, which he is named as several times at Ipet Reset, Luxor temple. This was unheard of before. A pharaoh whose titles included the son of Ra was usual, but the dazzling Aten was most unusual. He founded a craftsman's village between Melkata and his own mortuary temple, simply naming it Place of Aten. Amenhotep III then ordered a small temple to be built south in Nubia named Gem Aten, Discovery of Aten. This was a way to start the worship of the physical sun, but away from the eyes of the Amun priests. Amenhotep III did not solely worship Aten, but he still continued his worship of many other gods of Egypt. Yet he did show less favor to Amun, only because of the priestship. Amenhotep III could not have merely invented a god called Aten. So what is the Aten actually? Where did it originate? Aten has long-reaching rays into the past, all the way back to the 5th Dynasty in 2400 BC. A collection of over 2,000 separate papyrus documents have been discovered at a site in the north of Egypt called Abu Sir. Here, the pharaohs of the 5th dynasty built their own pyramids where they would be buried. These kings primarily worshipped the sun god Ra, even building a unique temple to the sun. In these Abusir documents, Aten is not named as a god. In fact, the name of Aten is merely a word to describe an aspect of the sun god Ra. Aten back then was the crown of Ra, the disc or orb that adorned his head. A part of Ra, yes, but not an independent god. This being 1,000 years before the birth of Akhenaten. Then Aten would make a grand new appearance in the 12th dynasty, around 1965 BC. Pharaoh Amunemhat I had died while out of Egypt. A now famous scribe named Sinai wrote down the dramatic tale of the king's passing. And it is in his writings that the Aten appears to have been named as a god for the first time. Sinai tells us that the now deceased pharaoh Amunemhat rose as a divine lord to the sky, thus uniting with the sun disk Aten, the divine body of the king merging with his creator. The Aten would be mentioned several times from here on out, but still remained relatively minor and obscured, maybe even overshadowed by the plethora of Egyptian deities. In 1388 BC, at the end of Thutmose IV's rule, the father of Amenhotep III, a stela is created by 2 male officials at Karnak, named Hor and Suti. They are giving thanks to many gods, and create a hymn to the sun, in which the Aten rises again, almost after 1,000 years of being in the dark. The stela reads, "Hail to you, Aten, the sun disk of day, creator of all, making them alive, great hawk, dapple-plumed, scarab who rises himself up, who creates himself unbegotten, eldest Horus in the midst of Nut, applauded for rising and also setting, who creates what the earth makes, the Khnum and Amun of the living." These men, being officials at Karnak, would have a great depth of knowledge of the Egyptian mythological order, and so it appears that during the reign of Thutmose IV, the idea of the Aten began to slightly come out of the shadows, and since Hor and Suti served even into the reign of Amenhotep III, it is possible that they would have relayed some of these hymns in front of the pharaoh, which would appear to have an unmistakable impact on Amenhotep III, and trickling down into the reign of his son and soon-to-be successor. In 1348 BC, the 3rd year of Amenhotep IV's reign, he decided to change all of Egyptian history by celebrating his jubilee, known as the Sed Festival. This was generally celebrated after 30 years on the throne, not a mere 3. The bringing forward of the celebration was almost like a rebirth for him, and he wanted to do this by making a grand statement of his power and divinity. At his celebration in Luxor, Pharaoh Amenhotep IV unveiled Gem Pa-Aten, the estate of the Aten. This was his new temple to the sun, the Aten. This would have been shocking to the public, who were invited to witness the celebration, and would have set the priests of Amun ablaze with anger. This new open-air temple would allow the worshippers to be bathed in the direct sunlight. The walls were adorned with great images of the pharaoh and his wife Nefertiti, with their hands raised to the Aten, whose sun rays would come down and bless the royal couple. The walls also included scenes of priests and worshippers bowing before the pharaoh and queen with their faces down in the dirt. Something that had never been witnessed before. This was all part of Amenhotep IV's vision. The temples to the Aten at Karnak and Luxor were not only there to proclaim that this new god had selected the pharaoh, but that the pharaoh was now more powerful and more divine than any of the Amun priests. Jempa Aten was also surrounded by colossal statues of Amenhotep IV and Nefertiti, shown with bizarre proportions. Long faces, thin limbs, sagging breasts and wide hips, both shown in this weird way.
For nearly 2 centuries, we've puzzled over Akhenaten's image, slender limbs, tapered contours, a figure both elongated and serene. Some see pathology such as Marfan syndrome or other speculative diseases based on stylized art. But the body found in tomb KV55 tells a different story. If we accept it as Akhenaten, there's no real evidence of disease, no signs of hormonal imbalance, no abnormalities beyond an elongated skull, which in itself is an inherited trait rather than a pathology. So maybe, just maybe, the clue isn't in illness, which has really been the focus. Perhaps it's in illumination or light in the art in itself. So if we imagine Amarna's late day glow, shadows lengthen, the body's edges blur and extend, arms become almost brush strokes, fingers stretch into delicate tracings. And we have to remember, at its heart, Artenism was revolutionary. It was a radical monolatry that broke from Egypt's pantheon and its rigid visual codes. By centering devotion solely on the Aten, Akhenaten demanded an art that was dynamic, uncaged, and alive with beams of light and shifting shadow. The measured symmetry of the old school simply couldn't contain it. Amarna art had to become fluid, mutable, as changeable as the god it honored.
This would have clearly shaken all who first set eyes on it. Now Akhenaten ordered that much of the tribute coming into Karnak would also be shared with Aten, not just Amun, to much objection by the Amun priests. But Amenhotep IV did not just stop at the unveiling of his new temples. He also proclaimed that the Aten was indeed a unique god, independent from Ra or Amun. To do this, he revealed that the Aten would have a cartouche, a sacred protected name. The cartouche of the Aten did in fact include the name of 2 other gods, even if just to change the meaning of those gods. Ra Horakti, who rejoices in the horizon, in his name Shu, which is Aten. Unveiling the cartouche of Aten now meant that it was a god, but also, since only royals and the pharaoh had their name in a cartouche, this meant that Amenhotep IV was derived from the Aten, and that the Aten was the overall ruler over the world. And thus, worshipping the pharaoh and his family was a form of worshipping Aten.
And under these post-Amarna rulers, ancient Egypt's plethora of gods began to become favorable again, and the people began to worship the way they used to. And their most revered practice of entering the afterlife became attainable once again. The former gods had returned. And of them all, none more important than Osiris, the god who allowed you into heaven. Anubis, the god that led you to Osiris, began to rise in prevalence once again. The old burial practices returned, where Anubis would lead you to the next world. A world pretty similar to ours, only as a paradise.
Now, the ancient Egyptians, they understood that sleep was conducive to good health because we see remedies for insomnia, but they also feared sleeping and dreaming because they didn't understand the neurological implications of sleep as we do today. So for the ancient Egyptians, they thought that during sleep they would be visited by unwanted demons and even people that had died. So they did everything to protect themselves. And if we have a look at Tuya and Yuya's beds, they're also adorned by these images of the goddess Taweret and the god Bes. Now, both of these deities seem to appear together quite a lot because they were household favorites. Bes is particularly interesting because he was the god of everything that was fun, everything to do with dancing and music and drinking and general partying. But he was also a protective deity that would ward off evil spirits and obviously protect the dreamer while they're sleeping. So he was depicted with achondroplasia, which is commonly known as dwarfism. Sometimes he's seen brandishing a knife and a sword, sometimes playing a musical instrument. Taweret was a very unusual looking deity. She had the head of a hippopotamus, the tail of a crocodile, and the limbs of a lion. She also had pendulous human breasts, so very unusual looking. She was a household favorite. She would also ward off evil demons and spirits. And she's also a deity that women would have to protect them during childbirth. So both had very similar functions. Now, it's understandable why the ancient Egyptians would fear sleeping. Because if we think about it, when we're sleeping, the muscles become paralyzed, irregular heartbeat, accompanied with hallucinations. So we're literally seeing things that aren't there. So we understand these now as nightmares or parasomnias or just regular dreaming. Before the ancient Egyptians, they probably were responsible for early myths about life after death and even demons. So it's understandable why they would have wanted to protect themselves. And Tuya and Yuya had the perfect beds to ensure this blissful sleep.
Although much of her is missing, such as her arms, inlaid eyes, nose, mouth, and clip-on linen, the carving on this 18th Dynasty woman is exquisite. Spanning from pre-dynastic times until the late period, concubines of the dead were small female figurines placed in men's tombs to fulfill sexual and reproductive needs in the next life. The time of conceiving children and giving birth was some of the most interesting and dangerous times to the ancient Egyptians. Protecting the female fertility was paramount. These strange ivory boomerang-shaped objects were crucial during childbirth. In essence, they were a magic wand to draw a protective spell around the pregnant woman. The hippo goddess Taweret became the protector of feminine pregnancy. Many women sought out Taweret to help them conceive and protect their birth. A blue faience hippo in the form of Taweret, decorated with Nile plant life, is a reminder of the ferocious energy a female hippo uses to protect her young. The principal wife of Thutmose III, Merit-Ra, is often shown in the guise of the goddess Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty, music, and motherhood. This unusual stela shows Merit-Ra and Thutmose III on the right appearing as the god Amun Min being the representative of male fertility and virility. With his erect circumcised penis shown together, these two symbolically represent the prosperity of the land.
The 13th Dynasty was nothing more than a disaster. Though we do have one incredible piece from the 13th Dynasty, found in Abydos in the tomb of King Jer from the 1st Dynasty. It was first believed to be the sarcophagus of Osiris. However, what we do know is that it has the name of King Jedheperu from the 13th Dynasty on it. The object depicts the god Osiris, with his wife Isis taking the form of a bird on top of him. From the 13th into the 17th Dynasty, Egypt was split between Egyptians and Hyksos. However, rising up comes the 17th Dynasty. A small group of Egyptians with their pharaoh Sobekneferu started an uprising against the Hyksos. This relief comes from the temple of Montu, the Theban god of war, found in a temple in an area known as El Tod.
What I love here is we see Sesostris in the form of Amun, with the feathers on his head, with the god Montu next to him, Montu identified by the two cobras on his brow, and obviously we can read his name. But what is so interesting is Montu has, on these ropes, he has the enemies, the 9 so-called enemies. Obviously they had more than 9 enemies, but these are the 9 major enemies. And they are all tied up here, and we can tell that these are different from cartouches. Around the name, we actually have what is like a city wall. So that is the city, the civilization that the pharaoh and the god have conquered, and they are tying up here. By the time of the rule of Sesostris II, a period of peace and prosperity spread throughout the land, with building and agricultural focuses in the Fayum Oasis and Sinai. Sesostris II even allowed foreigners to begin to move into certain areas in Egypt. This would have dire consequences by the time of his successor, the infamous tyrannical ruler Sesostris III.
The Greeks had a great way to look at the gods. They believed that they were all the same. They just had different names because of different languages in different places. A Greek statue of Sokneb Tunigeb, or as the Egyptians called him, Sobek. Even the Egyptian god of the Nile and of water, Hapi, became Nilos.
And all this to appease the hundreds, if not thousands, of the many gods of ancient Egypt. Gods like Amun with his erect penis for fertility, and the goddess Anuket, the protector of the Nile cataracts. She was worshipped all the way in the south on Elephantine Island, and later became the goddess of lust. Several other deities were worshipped at Elephantine as well, like the ram-headed god Khnum, often seen as the source of the Nile. He later became associated with the formation and creation of men. He had a temple dedicated by Thutmose III at Elephantine. Many gods had functions for the Nile, as it was their source of life, and living in the cataracts was one of the most important.
What we have over here is a beautiful, beautiful, damaged obviously, statue of the Nile god Hapi. He's here holding the lotus and papyrus, combining Upper and Lower Egypt. And he's shown in a very late 18th dynasty, early 19th dynasty, time of Seti I, Ramses I. And he is just so beautiful. He's shown with his full breasts to show the abundance of the Nile, as well as his large stomach with the folds.
Hapi is often shown combining the lotus and the papyrus, Upper and Lower Egypt. There were many forms of Hapi, such as the traditional full-bodied man. Yet he did have a feminine counterpart, and she was the goddess of the branches of the Nile Delta.
Khnum, the god that was worshipped here at Elephantine, the ram that lived on this island, the god of creation, the one who would mold the image of man.
One of the main deities that were worshipped here at Elephantine, apart from the main god of the island, which is Khnum, we have Anuket. And Anuket is a very interesting goddess. She's known for protecting the Nile. And what's really strange, she's shown with this sort of cone-shaped crown. And this cone-shaped crown is what inspired Nefertiti to have her own crown. Because Nefertiti is shown with a unique crown only worn by Nefertiti. And here we can see that quite well, that this crown is what inspired Nefertiti. So in a way, because Nefertiti was divine in her own way, Nefertiti might have been wanting to connect with the protection of the Nile.
There are many temples on Elephantine Island dedicated to female deities, like this one dedicated to the goddess of love and beauty, Hathor. This temple is attributed to a pharaoh who spread the empire deeper into Nubia.
We have Thutmose III here, wearing his military uniform, being blessed by the creator god, Khnum. On the other side, we have Satis, shown with the crown, the white crown of Egypt, wearing a double falcon necklace. She's so beautiful. And she is on the other side, holding Thutmose next to Amun.
Yet it was a female pharaoh who commissioned this temple, the stepmother of Thutmose III.
In temples, they would have sacred animals, like at Kom Ombo. They had a sacred crocodile. And when that animal died, it was mummified, similar to the Apis bull, which we see at the Serapeum at Sakara. Here at Elephantine, they worshipped Khnum, the ram. And here is one of those sacred rams that they kept in the temple. Once it died, it was mummified and covered in an elaborate golden mask, similar to a pharaoh.
Yet in later dynasties, gold was not only reserved for a pharaoh.
These weird scratchings that we see here are actually not created by birds or anything like that, or weathering. It's a specific scratching action that's happened here. What that is, people used to come here many years ago, thousands of years ago, to temples and scratch away at the sacred surface of the temple, because the temple was a gift from the god. It was the god's house. Scratch away and put it into a little bottle. They would go home with a little essence of that.
Some people used to mix that into magic potions and things to be connected to the divine force of this temple.
The force with which they wanted to connect was that of the goddess Isis. Isis was the mother of Horus. Horus was the reincarnated pharaoh on earth. The father of Horus and the husband of Isis was Osiris, the ruler of the Underworld. He first ruled on earth, then, when he was murdered, he was reassembled by his wife Isis. She then became pregnant spiritually from him. One myth at Philae is that Khnum from Elephantine helped Isis create the form of Horus. The very heart of this temple revered the power, determination, and love of Isis.
The inner sanctuary of the temple of Isis on Philae. And this offering table, it's more a plinth actually, would have had a golden statue of Isis. And this is where the priests would have come to adore the goddess. Inside here is one of the most beautiful depictions I've seen of the goddess Hathor, shown as a beautiful woman in the Ptolemaic style with the beautiful head of a cow, so elegantly carved.
It's ironic that the Nile almost killed this temple and then saved it. The ancients relied heavily on reading the level of the flood.
Down here, we have a nilometer, nilometer, depending where in the world you're from, that's what you're going to call it. And this is how they would have measured whether the Nile was going to flood correctly to make the harvest fruitful.
For thousands of years, the flooding of the Nile could predict prosperity or disaster. Up until the 20th century, Egypt still monitored flooding. Now the god of the Nile is controlled by Lake Nasser.
The rocks that we see behind us here are depicted even over here. And what's so special about this depiction is it's the god Hapi shown being protected by the snake in his home underneath these stones in the cataracts of the Nile. The cataracts which are here at Elephantine. This is Hapi inside his home. It is something so special.
One of the theories about why Roman Emperor Augustus completed this temple and dedicated it to Mangulus, a Nubian god, was to get the Nubians on his side before his attempted invasion. Left is Nubian Mangulus with Egyptian Horus on the right in this sparsely decorated temple.
Around the back of Kalabsha temple, we have a pharaoh offering to Isis, Horus, and Mangulus in his human form with a bit of blue paint still on his face and inlays for precious stones in the eyes. We go on, we have Horus again, Isis, and Osiris. We see here Hathor and Ramses offering to Horus with Selket, the scorpion goddess, to protect from poisons and bites. But look how beautiful the color is here. It's Ramses burning incense over pomegranates, grapes, breads, and they are still colored. It is absolutely beautiful. We have a triad statue of Ramses, Mut, and Hathor. It's incredible. Ramses over here, shown again, so colorful, so beautiful. I've never seen him like this. Offering a green goddess, Ma'at, to Amun. Here we have the blue on Amun, showing that he is in his hidden form. It is so beautiful. Amun again being offered Ma'at, being offered justice, balance. It's incredible.
Further down, before we go into the inner sanctum, is scenes repeated. Ramses now giving jars of oil to Amun, another triad statue, this time with the god from Elephantine. We have Khnum, Ramses in the middle, and Anuket. It is beautiful. We see Satis, another goddess from Elephantine. Khnum, the god of creation, seated, while Ramses II and Anuket come in and give them offerings. In fact, the goddesses behind Ramses are supporting him before the other gods, supporting the fact that Ramses II is in fact on his way to become a god. Again, Ramses on the other side, shown smiting a Libyan, the two major enemies of Ramses II, repeated twice here. The inner sanctuary, we have the gods again repeated from the outside on the inside. But the most amazing thing is this image of Ramses II being suckled by a goddess. Isn't it just amazing? The young prince with a beautiful goddess. Here he offers jars to Ra, Horus. I've never seen Ramses in so much color. Before, Amun and Amun right over here, inside this inner sanctum, would have been probably a golden statue dedicated to Ramses II, because in fact, Ramses declared he was a god. So Ramses would have been in here. We see Ptah on the other side. Amun again being burnt incense of frankincense by Ramses II. Khnum, the creator god, creating life for Ramses. Khnum gave life to Ramses because Ramses lived until he was around 96. And the life from Khnum that went into Ramses created over 150 children. And here is the goddess Anuket, yet again suckling the young prince when he was probably around 13 years old, because Ramses became a co-regent with Seti, his father, at around 16 years old. So here he is being prepared. He is being fed by the goddess to become the pharaoh.
An effigy of the Egyptian god of wisdom, Thoth, was housed in this naos, with this beautiful light effect around, a repeated theme in ancient Egypt, the balance between light and dark. Anhor and Mangulus merging as one, the combination of Egyptian and Nubian gods are shown in this temple because it was a collaborative effort between Greek pharaoh Ptolemy IV and the Nubian pharaoh Arkemani from Meroe.
We can see his wife and the man Penaut giving a text to, giving a text to the god Thoth. Thoth writing down that they have not sinned. Quite ironic, considering Penaut sanctioned the robbing of the Valley of the Kings during the reign of Ramses VI. And here we see Penaut's wife and himself again before Horus. Horus presenting them to Osiris, shown in his red dress, and this time not with green skin, wearing a nemes and a crown, the white crown. Here we can see Isis and Nephthys behind, supporting Osiris in his decision to allow the viceroy into heaven. Down here we can see Penaut on his knees before the cow goddess Hathor, and Hathor is welcoming him into his tomb. This mound is his tomb, the mound that was moved in the 60s. It's amazing. Here's the tomb inside, and Hathor coming out with the lotus and papyrus, greeting the man. Down here is the most intact image of Penaut
in the entire tomb. It is Penawut in the middle, being poured over, being cleansed by Thoth and Anubis. The water painted with this beautiful blue because Penawut started to gain power. The priests started to gain power. And this is where Egypt began to decline. Over here is Penawut's wife shaking a sistrum, and Penawut giving an offering of lotus and papyrus flowers to Osiris. We see the solar barge, which would have taken Penawut on his journey to the afterlife. In the center is a triad statue that would have featured Penawut in the middle, maybe his wife on this side, and a daughter on that side. We're not sure, but Penawut was shown under the protection of the cow goddess Hathor coming out of the tomb, the same scene that we see on the walls. Down here is Penawut and his wife and his family bringing the offerings to Horus, giving them back to Penawut for him to enjoy in the afterlife.
Dedicated to a triad of gods, no expense was spared in the decoration.
We have Ramses II standing by the tree of life. He's picking his name off of the tree, his royal name, and he is presenting his name towards the god Ptah and Sekhmet. And next to that, we have the god of wisdom, Thoth, writing down exactly what is happening. He's giving Ramses his name.
No war scenes inside this temple, rather religious scenes showing the Egyptians' fervent belief system. Vivid images of the gods like Hathor, the god of fertility, Amun, shown with his erect phallus before the pharaoh. Ramses, frozen in time in procession.
Here is Ramses II, shown wearing the leopard dress with the cap crown. He is here, a high priest. But what's interesting, Ramses and the other priests are presenting the barge with a statue of Ramses towards, no guess, Ramses himself. As we go further south, Ramses is becoming more divine.
If we head back to the Cairo Museum, the full might of Khafra can be contemplated. This life-size statue of Khafra from his valley temple, made from a greenish diorite stone that had to be specifically brought from the deserts of Libya. The hyper-detailed image shows the delicate yet powerful features of Khafra. His name and titles appear at the base, adjacent to his feet, with even the toenails that have been rendered lifelike. Seated on a throne with papyrus motifs, headed by lions. One hand relaxed, the other making a fist, as he wears only a pleated kilt with the ceremonial bull's tail attached. However, the beautiful face and well-physiqued king is not the highlight. At the back of his striped nemes is a beautiful symbol, a falcon with its wings opened and enclosing the king. This falcon is the god Horus. The pharaoh is Horus on earth. This falcon is protecting the king and connecting him to the eternal rebirth of the sun. Although this creature may appear to be elegant, serene, and beautiful, for the ancients, it was crafted
to strike fear into the viewer. Yet, there are various forms of sphinxes in Egypt. This specific one was the guardian. Lions have always played a large role in Egyptian religion. The male lion god, Aker, being the lion on which the sun rested as it rose each day. Yet, whose face is on the enigmatic beast? Some have suggested that it predates the Giza pyramids. However, evidence disproves this. 1,000 years after the death of Khafra, during the 18th Dynasty, a young prince named Thutmosis IV erected a stela between the paws of the Sphinx, or, in its ancient name, Horem-Akhet, Horus of the Horizon, telling a fantastic tale.
Hunting lions and flocks, and riding in his chariot, his horses faster than the wind. The hour came to give rest to his followers at the limbs of Horem-Akhet. Prince Thutmosis came passing by at the time of midday, and he sat down in the shadow of the great god. Sleep seized him, asleep at the time when the sun was at its zenith. And he found the majesty of the noble god speaking with his own mouth, like the words of a father for his son, saying, "Look at me, see me, my son Thutmosis. I am your father, Horem-Akhet, born of Atur, and I shall give you kingship on earth in front of all the living ones. You shall wear the white and red crowns upon the throne of Ger. The earth shall be yours, in its length and width. Everything that the eye of the Lord of all illuminates. The food of the two lands shall be yours, as well as the great tributes of every foreign land. Your lifetime will be a time great in years. My face is yours, my heart is yours, as you are a protector to me. For my current condition is like one that is in need. All my limbs, as if they were dismembered, as the sands of the desert upon which I lie have reached me. So run to me, to have that done which I desire. Know that you are my son, and my protector. Come forth, and I shall be with you. I shall be your leader."
Unfortunately, the stela is damaged, and the story begins to break off. The final legible lines state,
"The king's son awoke hearing this. He understood the words of the god, and he put them in his heart. They shall protect the offerings to the god, which we bring for him, oxen, fruit, and all vegetables. And we shall give praise to the ancestors. Khafra's image, seen by Atum, Horem-Akhet."
This last line gives us a strong indication that the Sphinx was created in Khafra's image. Preceding Thutmosis IV, Amenhotep II completed work on a new temple built to the side of the Sphinx, now known as the New Sphinx Temple, and set up a band of priests whose sole purpose was to give offerings to the Great Sphinx. The temple seems to be along the same design as Old Kingdom solo temples, which would then be connected to the worship of the sun god, with ceremonies being performed on a raised platform reached by staircases, connecting Horus of the horizon, the Sphinx, to the majesty of the rising and setting sun. Many small stela indicating this have been found in the temple, dedicated by priests, some even from hundreds of years later, from the reign of Ramses II. From these stela, we get the impression that Thutmosis IV had a large statue of himself placed at the paws of the Sphinx, behind the dream stela. The addition of a pleated Osiride-style beard was also added in the 18th Dynasty, as this was not present during the Old Kingdom. Fragments of this beard are now in the United Kingdom. The giant cobra from the Nemes crown of the Sphinx is also broken off through the millennia and is now on display at the Cairo Museum.
Among the many gods shown in his tomb is this strange-looking male lion-headed god. This is Mahes, a minor god with a niche following. The sister of Isis, Nephthys, protecting Horus. Anubis, the leader of the dead, is seen reviving the mummy of Amun, who is laid out on a bed headed with male lions. Before them, Isis is kneeling while mourning for the dead. Isis was the wife of Osiris, the god of the next life. In tombs, Osiris is usually depicted as the pharaoh of that time, yet the cartouches in the tomb are empty. We do not know who he is.
This is a very, very unique tomb. Yes. I mean, we have Mahes over here depicted in an extremely strange way.
It's different than the city one and the temples.
Yeah, it's very different symbolism in this tomb. Very different.
Because the art, as we mentioned before, get less during the Greek-Roman period and change it in culture and everything.
Adjusted, adapted.
Also, I want to speak about the roof, almost inside the ceilings, inside temples.
I didn't even look up yet.
Look, it's full of vultures and falcons and stars.
Beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. Because the ceiling itself represents the sky.
Yeah.
So sky has a blue color, so some tombs we have like Ramses I, yes. Blue color. The sky has stars, the sky has birds.
Yes. And the stars are the ancestors.
Yes.
So it's all symbols.
All symbolic, but I wanted to speak about vulture. The vulture, yes. Now, the vulture have no such respect like the ancient time.
Mm-hmm. Very like a dirty bird now.
Yes, they're nasty and take that, the animals not good. Yeah. But the ancient Egyptians, they have different vision to the vulture.
Okay.
Clean the environment.
Yes.
After the war, you eat the dead bodies.
Yeah.
So the bacteria not increase to hurt the people. So they consider the vulture a symbol to get us mood.
Yes.
So when we see that in roofs, temples or tombs, as one day if this place come dirty, it's come to clean it up, and this place are clean, their place are purified.
Literally, yeah. Literally means that as you walk under here, you're being purified.
Yeah, excellent. You got the point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting, and they have the vulture and the falcon. I've never seen them do both. So this is so unique.
So unique. I love that. Thank you to recommend this tomb to come. Thank you, really, I love it.
What I really love is the purification happening in this tomb. We have the tree goddess here. You can see the beautiful branches coming out with these little green leaves. The green is so bright. But she's pouring out this jug, and coming out of the jug is the water. But in the water, you can see the Ankh sign, literally showing that the water is giving life.
But as always, with life there must be death, and one creature embodies this perfectly.
Amun, or Emmet in English, it's a creature in afterlife, like hyena's body, and some people say hippopotamus body, and crocodile head, like mythological creature, try to eat you if you are guilty. We find this concept in all religion. So before you make the people fall in sin, you have to terrify them, to have to make them scared to not make sin or mistakes. So Amun, I love it because Amun can stop the guilty to do sins. And also see Amun here, he tried to keep calm, to allow to him to cross and meet Osiris at the end of the sea.
Amun held no religious or official titles. He was a wealthy landowner who produced wine and dates to be exported to their known world. His wife is shown in the tomb. She was an Egyptian woman. Amun also had 2 children. He is shown in the tomb with both of his sons. Here, Tutankhamun was advised by his vizier to make it publicly known that he did not agree with his father's reign and religious beliefs. He installed a stela where he reinstated all the gods of old and discredited his father's reign. The stela reads, "The temples of the gods and goddesses, from Elephantine down to the marshes of the delta, had been overgrown with weeds. Their sanctuaries were as if they had never been. I have restored what was once in ruin as monuments of an eternal age. I have dispelled injustice throughout the 2 lands, so that it may make lying to be an abomination of the land. The gods heard my voice and rejoiced." From this, we can clearly understand that Egypt was trying to regain the favor of their many gods, of which that had been previously abandoned. He is crouching down, his hair in a sidelock to indicate a young boy, while he also has a royal cobra on his brow. His hand is raised up with his finger to his mouth, a symbol of youth and innocence for the ancient Egyptians. Protecting the young prince is a falcon. One may think that this is Ra, the sun god, or the falcon god Horus. But what's interesting is this statue is from Avaris, where Ramses II was born. And Ramses is connecting himself here with another god that's not Egyptian. That falcon is not Egyptian. On the side, we can see here it's written Horon. Horon is the Hyksos, god of the sun, that's associated with Horus. But he's very clearly written out the Hyksos name to show that this is where he's born. This whole statue is a giant name marker for Ramses. The sun disk on his head spells Ra. The young boy is Mes, meaning born, and he holds a plant in his hand, meaning Su. Ra Mesu, born of Ra, Ramses. At Karnak, the young Ramses is shown also seated between the paws of a sphinx with a ram's head. We know he is prepubescent here, as he still has his sidelock of hair. Egypt had many sacred sites, but one would be more revered than any other: Abydos. For over 1,000 years by the time of Seti, the ancient Egyptians had been making pilgrimages to Abydos to connect to the very first pharaoh's burial sites, and to the god of the next life, Osiris. Ramses I had started the construction for a vast new temple here, but was not able to finish it in his short reign. Thus, Seti took it upon himself to make Abydos his first religious priority. Here, Seti would prove to the gods that he and his family were worthy of the crown. It is also here that we see that Seti began closely, personally training Ramses.
This is a beautiful statue of Ramses II over here. Unfortunately, he's missing his head, but it is Ramses depicted as the god Amun. Next to him, we have the wife of Amun, the god's wife, Mut, the mother goddess. Yet Mut over here is indeed Nefertari. And a little detail on the statue of Ramses as Amun is in between his legs is the ceremonial bull's tail. This was depicted all the way from the first dynasty, from Pharaoh Namo. And here, if you look closely, you can see it between the legs of Ramses attached at the back, as one of Ramses' names was indeed the strong bull. This statue, in its breathtakingly beautiful state, proves that Ramses and Nefertari were Amun and Mut on earth.
Seti had not seen the completion of his immense temple to Osiris. Ramses saw this as his first important duty. He ensured that all of the chapels of Seti's temple were completed to his father's standards, making a statement: "I have searched both the upper and lower lands for only the finest of craftsmen to complete both mine and my father's monuments." Ramses wanted only the best for his building projects, of which he had many planned. Since the Osiris temple is where Seti asked Ra for 3 lifetimes for Ramses, and the pharaoh and his son are shown among all of the other kings, and being linked to the god of the next life Osiris, Ramses wanted to make it known that this site was vastly important.
See here these offering statues of Ramses shown in blue, signifying that this is the spirit of Ramses, since blue is the hidden color, like Amun-Ra. In each of these niches would have been an offering statue of Ramses, with the offerings from the priests being placed here. This is one of the temples that Ramses built, where he went out of his way to find the best artisans in the country. This male god, shown with no animal features, is in fact the jackal-headed god Anubis, the leader of the dead. His name written here, Anpu, with the jackal here. This is the only known image of Anubis shown as a man. Ramses II holding out his pinky, anointing the forehead of Osiris with sacred oil. But Osiris shown here with turquoise blue skin. Alternatively, we would usually see him shown with black or green skin, but here in Abydos, in Seti and Ramses' temple, we see Osiris with this special turquoise blue. Alternatively, we can see Osiris shown with the red skin of a man.
Ramses then returned to Luxor. He had to oversee the new plans of the extensions for the world's largest temple complex in history, Karnak. A unique statue from Heliopolis shows Ramses with a giant scarab on his head, thus showing his connection to the god of the sun Ra and the god of rebirth, the scarab Khepri. This is symbolic to say that the pharaoh makes the sun rise. It is absolutely amazing. the year 16 of Ramses' reign, a great sadness would spread through Egypt. The symbol of the king's strength on earth had died. This was the Apis bull. The country would have been plunged into a mourning period. During this time, the sacred bull would be mummified as if it were a pharaoh. Kom, who was the overseer of the Serapeum, would have prepared the bull for burial. A grand ceremony was held with Ramses in the lead. The bull was mummified at the Temple of Ptah in Memphis. Crowds would gather for the funeral, which processioned all the way past the Avenue of Sphinxes into the Serapeum. The bull, which was covered in jewels and a gold death mask, was taken deep below into the Serapeum catacombs and laid to rest in its own giant granite sarcophagus. After which, a new sacred bull would be chosen to represent the strength of the king. The deep catacombs of the Serapeum would be greatly extended by Kom in his father's name. The lifespan of a well-cared-for bull is around 25 years. Ramses would have buried over 6 bulls during his long reign. There were many major players in the discussions with the Hittites to try and weed out peace. These 3 were Pa-Ser, the vizier, and Prince Kom and Nemtimes. These 3 men were sent as envoys to Hattusilus to personally deliver the letters between the Egyptians and the Hittites. In 1997, the tomb of Nemtimes was discovered at Sakara, which revealed much of the missing part of the discussions. In the tomb, Nemtimes is named as Ramses' royal envoy to all foreign lands, the chief steward of Memphis, overseer of the works in the Temple of Ptah, fan-bearer on the right of the king, and most interestingly, the eyes of the king. Nemtimes was a very important individual to Ramses, so much so that the king afforded him a magnificent tomb at Sakara. At the very central view of the tomb is a large statue of the goddess Hathor.
This beautiful Hathor cow is coming out of the mound, out of the tomb, with Ramses II. Right here, beautiful colors, beautiful yellow and blue nemes. She has the beautiful eye of Ra. It's absolutely stunning to see this. And we see this quite often during the 19th Dynasty. And down here is the burial chamber. So she's protecting the burial chamber, but also welcoming the sarcophagus and the mummy into the tomb during the funeral.
Above, we can see where Ramses II had his coronation, at Jebel Barkal, down in Sudan, just a few kilometers from here. There's Ramses standing before the serpent coming out of the mound. That signifies the sacred mound of Amun in Nubia.
Visually, Amun is distinct from his crown with 2 feathers. He often appears with blue skin as he was the hidden god, the god that was always present. Amun had many roles in ancient Egypt. He was the supreme god, the king over all gods. He was connected with the strength of the ram, which is why Ramses often wears the ram's horn of Amun. He is always shown in the company of the gods, like the fierce lioness goddess, Sekhmet, the one who symbolized strength in war. Apart from the god of the living, Amun, Ramses also connected himself to the god of the dead, Osiris.
My absolute favorite scene inside Habu symbol is this one. It is Ramses with the goddess Mut. Yet Mut over here is again Nefertari. Nefertari is holding him behind the head, pulling him in by the arm. ready to give him a kiss. It is so touching, so beautiful, so romantic, exactly how Ramses II was with his wife.
The second columned hall features Ramses in intimate, direct scenes with the gods.
Because of his emotional state and age, he stopped taking part in all war efforts many years ago around the death of Nefertari. His focus was on religious roles for the rest of his life. Ramses had been shown as becoming more and more divine as the years passed, something all pharaohs did, eventually becoming a god on earth. Ramses was no exception to this. At Abu Simbel, we can see the ultimate image of Ramses becoming a god.
And the god that is worshipped in this temple is on this wall, right over here. We can see Ramses II offering 2 jars of wine with his name, Osiris, written here. And another special god, now not seated with a triad of other gods, but as a single deity, wearing the ram's horn of Amun. This god's name is indicated over here. It is Ramses II. Ramses giving offerings to Ramses, because by this point in his life, he had retired from militaristic actions and took a more religious and political role. And for that, Ramses then was deified.
Several stelae have been found dedicated from nobles to Ramses, where Ramses is shown giving offerings to the divine form of himself. He became a god. The avenue of Anubis sphinxes, each protecting a small statue of the pharaoh. These same Anubis sphinxes that would have witnessed the burials of many of Ramses' past family. Now only one Anubis remains. I heard rumors that there is a second one that was relocated. I wanted to see just another Anubis that saw Ramses' funeral. Finally, I tracked it down to the French excavation house on the west bank of Luxor. After the procession passed the leader of the dead, the funeral procession would have walked toward the Valley of the Kings.